Well, I am super honored to be able to sit down at the New Mexico Tattoo Fiesta with a person who is doing amazing things for the tattoo industry. Not just currently, but bringing something from the past, bringing our ancient heritage to the forefront of today's society's mind, right? Bringing back the historical indigenous cultures that, well, at one point were falling away, but somebody's reaching back and pulling them to where we can recall them and learn from them. Now, you're going to see that I'm sitting here holding a microphone to my mouth because we're in a very loud place. We're at the tattoo convention, and it's so loud because tattooing has become a huge explosion in society today. Everybody loves getting tattooed, but not everybody knows exactly where it came from. So I'm going to sit here with Lars Krutak. We have the tattoo hunter right here, a PhD in anthropology. He has been spending the last 23 years studying tattooing, the indigenous tattooing, and over 50 different tattoo research papers and studies over 30 plus countries, featured on the Discovery Channel, still continuing to work on different, you have over 90 published articles, several books that have, you've already sold out this weekend. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce Lars Krutak. Thanks for taking the time, sir.
Hey, thank you, Ben. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really happy to the organizers, Bale and his team here at the New Mexico Tattoo Fiesta, for bringing me here so that I could meet with everybody this weekend and to meet all of the fans of tattooing, ancient and modern.
Which you were brought out here. You were here for the giving some presentations, which you gave 2 amazing presentations, kind of sharing a little bit of your history, how you kind of got into your current passion, and again, educating everyone that came to it about some of these ancient traditions that are disappearing. And you also shared with us, some of your future goals. But I always like to, everyone loves a story. Everyone loves a good story. So I always like to kind of get a little background, like what really brought you into being really interested in ancient indigenous tattooing.
Yeah, so over 20 years ago, I was a graduate student in Alaska, and I didn't have a thesis project, but I came across a tattooed elder who was walking across campus, and that really sparked my imagination because I didn't have any tattoos. I didn't know anything about tattoos. I didn't know anything about indigenous tattooing. And I started digging in the archives and quickly realized that across the Arctic, there were vibrant traditions of tattooing that once took place before the arrival of missionaries and government agents of change in the boarding school era. And then upon more research and examination into these ancient traditions, I learned about a small group of elderly women that were living on an island off the coast of Alaska, St. Lawrence Island, the home of the Yup'ik people. And I thought it maybe would be interesting to do my research project, my master's thesis, on the tattooing traditions of those people and to learn more about the tattoos of these indigenous elders. And so both of the villages, their leadership, I wrote letters introducing myself. They invited me to come to the community. And so I basically focused in on their stories written in ink. Ultimately, their tattoos were a part of their biographies of what made them Yup'ik people, but also what made them human. And so after learning, about these incredible traditions, all the various layers, I quickly came to my senses and thought, well, if no one was really interested in documenting their tattooing traditions here, how many other indigenous societies around the world are these stories going unheard? They're not being documented. This wisdom's not being preserved for future generations. In the event there would be a tattoo revival. So I took it upon myself to start finding ways to earn money to travel and to record these stories and preserve this cultural heritage for future generations.
It's amazing. So you basically saw you saw a need, right? And you wanted to fill that need, meaning seeing that a lot of these ancient historical traditions were disappearing. Is that what, obviously those of us who are in tattooing, we're attracted. Maybe it's even just in our DNA. We're attracted to visually, aesthetically pleasing art on the body. Is that what, really was the calling? Because I'm sure there could be other archaeologists I don't care about it. I'll let it fall away, right? You felt passionate enough to want to chase after this, become the tattoo hunter and seek it out. Was there something else And you said you didn't have any tattoos at this time, but you felt called to do it. You know, like, that's what I'm interested in, is like, what was that niche that really kind of pushed you forward and kept you going 2 decades plus?
I didn't really see anybody at that time that was like doing any substantive, let's say, quote unquote, anthropological or even archaeological research or even social science research about these ancient tattooing traditions, which ultimately are part of, you know, as I noted earlier, what makes us human. They're the earliest forms of human expression. They're marks of identity, marks of accomplishment. They're medicinal tattoos. They're marks of spirituality. But it seems like all of these voices weren't being recorded and these messages weren't being heard. And the elders I worked with on St. Lawrence Island were very proud of their tattoos. They sacrificed themselves to earn the right to be tattooed like their ancestors. And I thought that really resonated with me. I thought these were very powerful visual and psychological and personal statements. And I just didn't understand why no one was paying attention to them at that time, and let's say in academia.
Yeah.
And so I felt like something needs to be done because the women I'm interviewing are 80 and 90 years old. And one more generation, they will be gone forever.
Yeah. And
they're the repositories of this ancestral knowledge, as well as other gatekeepers in the community. They weren't tattooed, but no one was doing anything about it. So I just took it upon myself. I thought it was a worthy mission, and I'm very happy and blessed and humbled that I was allowed, and I have been allowed continually, to be able to enter into these communities and for these elders to share their stories with me.
That's cool. That's amazing. I know I'm as a modern day tattooer, so grateful that you've taken on this mission. And even though maybe you weren't tattooed before, but you recognized the value of it and went full throttle. And now you've obviously been collecting some tattoos. And well, tell us, how many tattoos do you have now?
That is hard to quantify.
Right.
I don't really count how many tattoos I have. A lot of mine are smaller works because I'm always on the road traveling, and I may need to continue on with research. I've been tattooed with all the traditional techniques. So we're talking about needle and thread tattooing or skin stitching, hand tapping, hand poking, scarification, or skin cut tattooing. Then the pigment is rubbed into the incisions.
Okay.
They're all deeply meaningful for me. They were each created precisely for me based on my personal story, where I'm going, where I plan to travel, where I have been. A lot of them are based on traditional motifs, but not put on my body in traditional placement. I don't pretend to wear tattoos that are related to people's clans,
Sure.
or family heritage or protector spirits, because it's a conversation that you have with a tattoo artist. It's the responsibility, I think, of the tattoo artist to be educated and informed about the tattooing patterns that they're putting on people, and those that have educated themselves, so that come from these cultures, know what is appropriate for a non-Indigenous person to wear.
Sure.
And to not wear. And so those are the tattoos that I have.
That's cool. And well, you know, you talk about people who are tattoo artists and they know what's appropriate and they've been trained, you know, in that particular culture and that heritage. You know, today it's so easy for someone to get into tattooing. And you had even asked an Iban tattoo master, right? Could anyone get into this craft? And I think that you responded that yes, anyone could get into it, but only the true masters saw like a vision. And that just kind of speaks to, you know, ancient tattooing being something you just didn't step into and start doing it, right? You had to either have to go through some sort of process. You know, are there any other cool processes that you've learned about throughout your studies?
Well, in some Indigenous cultures, you know, the profession of tattooist was hereditary. It was passed down the family line. And some cultures, it was relegated to the aristocratic class. So only, I'm thinking of the Konyak and Wancho Naga in Northeast India.
Yeah.
Only tattooing queens or those of the highest social class were the tattooists for their communities as well as adjacent villages, if they ruled over a territory.
Ooh.
In the case of the Iban, yes, anybody could become a tattoo artist, but only sort of, I would say, the chosen few or their masters were approached by a tutelary spirit in a dream or a vision and that particular spirit took them under their wing, if you will, and guided them along their way with special gifts, or might provide the locations of charms to dip into batches of tattoo pigment to render specific qualities to tattoo bearers. So yeah, there's various levels, on a culture by culture basis, like who and who could not become a tattooist, and so on.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, it seems like what's wild is in antiquity or in ancient times, tattooing was done by royalty. It was like a sign of prestige, and you had to really, step up and be elevated to that position. Yet in our modern culture, now it's being done by, obviously very influential, very talented artists, but it almost comes from a subculture, right? Where it was the opposite, where the royalty kind of pushed away or kind of tried to move away from this ancient craft of tattooing, and it's kind of flipped, kind of 180 or 360, whatnot. So it's just interesting that the change over time. And you had talked about when the Wang Odd, she at one point back in 2007, I believe, when you were doing your first interview with her, and then she was tattooing that warrior who had slain a couple of other rivals and whatnot, how she was the last tattooer in that era. And it was almost like there's been that gap where it kind of fell off, and maybe because it wasn't being documented and pushed forward, it kind of started to gain some sort of maybe negative connotation that kind of resonated into modern culture. I don't know if there's anything you can speak to that at all, or...
Well, in the case of the Kalinga and Apo Wangado guy, who in, the early 2000s was an unrecognized tattooist, although she had formerly practiced tattooing since she was 15 years old. When I first met her, she was about 87 years old. We don't know her exact age because she doesn't have a birth certificate. We believe that she's now over 100 years old and probably holds the world's record for the longest practicing tattoo artist, or the oldest practicing tattooist. But amongst that culture, at least in the Philippines, when I interviewed elders back then, whenever they traveled to the lowlands, there were very highly negative connotations charged with their tattoos, because it's a very Roman Catholic society in the Philippines. Tattoos were always associated with criminality, negative behaviors. And a lot of the elders, when they traveled to the lowlands to trade agricultural products, especially if they had sleeves or leg tattoos, they were made to feel ashamed of their tattoos. And they often wore, long sleeve shirts and pants to hide, because they were made to feel ashamed of their tattoos. But now there's been a complete reversal, 360 degrees. Now tattooing, it took a generation, but it's now worn as a mark of pride by people across the Philippines, as something that's authentic to the Philippines. That's practiced nowhere else in the world. There's many diasporic Filipinos who long for their homeland, that want something that's original to their homeland, that's unique and unto itself. And I think that's why a lot of people that gravitate to travel to make the tattoo pilgrimage to Wang Od's village of Buscalan to be tattooed by her and the dozens of apprentices she has since taught how to pick up the tradition so that it will not vanish into the future, because it is a powerful mark of identity that's been around as long as the Kalinga have been on this earth. And she didn't want to let go of that form of cultural and artistic expression. And it will not. It will continue in the future by evidence of the many young women that are carrying these tattooing traditions into the future.
That's cool.
Even though they might be on the bodies of Kalinga, they might be contemporary versions on the bodies of non-Kalinga that receive tattoos.
Well, that's cool. I mean, it's just how, I know you're humble and you're not taking all the credit for it, but I feel like it was your desire to kind of, chase down these ancient tattoos, and you documented her progress. And I mean, even when you shared the video, you did mention like, she's the last one. But since then, like you said, you've got, hundreds and not thousands now flocking to it. So you definitely helped reinvigorate that. And again, it's just one of those like, an amazing serendipitous act that happened. And tattooing coming from this, ancient medicinal and magical and almost spiritual elements. It's almost like this, light-haired Westerner came across the country, came across the world, and connected and brought more attention to this, and now reinvigorated this kind of renaissance there, and again re-stimulated even the concept of like female tattoo artists. How in ancient antiquity you talk about how tattooing was predominantly done by females, and in modern culture it was predominantly done by males, and now there's this kind of resurgence of female tattoo artists coming into it. So it's almost like this kind of like this revolving kind of repeat of ancient cultures, right? Of ancient prestigious female tattoo artists are now coming back up into modern society. It's becoming more accepted. Obviously, it's popular. More tattoos are done than ever. And for anyone who has the opportunity, you want to definitely find you on social medias. I want to ask you one more question, then I want to be able to have people find a way to find you. Now, you did get all those different forms of tattooing, and as a tattoo artist, I've had some tapping, and then just a modern style of electric tattooing. Which one was the most unique experience you had with tattooing? And I imagine they're all unique, right? But
yeah, I mean, all of these
stands out.
Yeah, all of these tattoos are deeply meaningful to me. I mean, they all stand out because they remind me of particular moments in time, really interesting people that I've met. I'm always educating myself and always learning from the people that I interview, and I oftentimes work with people's grandparents.
Yeah.
And I really respect my elders, and I respect other people's elders, and oftentimes they're forgotten in their communities, just like here in our communities, we often forget about our elders.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot that we could learn from them, and we should not lose sight of that, honestly.
Yeah. Well said, of course. I imagine there's probably documentation of your work. So where if people want to maybe learn about what you're doing, what's coming up, where could people find more information about you?
Yeah, I mean, you could visit my website, which on this banner I have is my LarsKrutak.com. I'm always trying to update it with, our articles and news items that don't revolve around me, but that are in the tattooing space. Like when Wang Od made the cover of Vogue Philippines, probably the oldest cover girl in the history of Vogue anywhere. It's really important to share those news items as they come to me. Sometimes by virtue of what I've been doing for so long, I may get early mornings or prompts to those. I'm pretty active on social media. You can find me on Instagram about new projects I'm working on. So I curate exhibitions. I'm active in the documentary space, and then of course publishing and writing. So you can find me there. And then most of my articles, my academic articles, are on academia.edu for free download. So you can find me there. I have a specific page there. So I'm really easy to find. Or you can just type in tattoo anthropologist in Google, and I will come up at the very top.
That's awesome.
So, easy to find.
Very cool, very cool. Well, as I said before, as a modern tattooer, I'm so very grateful that you've taken on yourself, as well as others in your field, taken on the task of reaching back and bringing where we came from to the forefront of our minds, so that we can learn from our ancestors, learn from our elders, right? When we learn from our history, we tend not to make the same mistakes, usually. And it was amazing getting to work with you this past weekend, help you present and introduce you and learn from you. And I hope that you all have an opportunity to check out the website, the Instagram. If you want to dig deep into the academia, definitely go there. We'll put all those links in there. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross, sir.
Well, I appreciate it so much, Ben. This is an outstanding event. I'm really humbled to be here. And if I just shed a tiny bit of light on some of these indigenous tattooing traditions that people didn't know about, or these indigenous peoples in different countries, I feel like that's why I am here.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all.